In my ongoing quest to learn more about comics and understand them and why exactly they work, today I'm going to be talking about Captain America issue number 4, or Captain America Comics issue number 4, is I guess the more correct way to say it, because it's not single issue stories in here. It's, a collection of 4 or 5 Cap stories. And then there's Tuck, the Cave Boy, and whatever else. The ones that I ignore, even though I should probably give them a glance at least. Anyway, I had a little bit of a when I talked about Captain America number 3, I brought up the question: hey, did Stan Lee make Captain America iconic? Now, understand a little bit of history, a little bit of background. Stan Lee didn't really make his big splash in comics until late 61, early 62 with Fantastic Four, and there's all sorts of stories about it, but Fantastic Four was his breakout hit and what I guess made him a star in comics. And while he does have writing credits on Captain America starting in issue 3, I think, somebody pointed out to me, somebody who was checking out Swing Through Comics, this Captain America review over on YouTube, goes by the name of Peace, pointing out to me something. I'll just read directly what he says. He says, Captain America was created by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon and was a huge success since the first 2 issues, which I loved. I read them and I loved them. Jack Kirby and Joe Simon wrote and drew the main stories until issue 10 when they left the company. Oh, there we go. That's interesting. Stan Lee started to write at issue 3, but just those short stories. So they're prose, little short stories with an image above them. And anyway, thank you for clarifying that to me. I didn't realize they left at 10 issues in, and now I was actually going to quit reading Cap pretty soon because I wanted to just hurry up and, go through and read more of the, Fantastic Four and the 60s Marvel stuff and get into that. But I think I'm actually going to stick it all the way through because I really do like these Cap comics. And I think it's interesting that they left at issue 10, and I might even want to read like issue 11 and 12 and see exactly, what happened to Cap at that time and who takes over. I won't look ahead, and if you want to comment about it, go ahead, I guess. But if I see that you're giving me spoilers on ancient history, I might just ignore it because I'd rather find out on my own. Anyway, part of the reason I'm reading these comics, which is something I brought up before, is that I want to kind of get a sense for what it was like as a reader at the time that these things were coming out, to experience them. Of course, I can only do a faint assimilation or approximation of that because they're all available to me digitally. That's how I'm reading them. I can see the counts of them, how many there are total and all that kind of stuff. But I try not to let that ruin it for me. But I also don't think that I'm getting a fully authentic experience. But I'm kind of trying to go there, be a kid at heart and just kind of take these things on as they come. So anyway, that all being said, I'm going to go ahead and just say that I want to declare that I thoroughly enjoyed this issue of Captain America Comics number 4. All the Cap stories in it were great. I kind of jokingly put in my synopsis that Captain America and Bucky take on the poor, let's see, a wild dream. Gosh, what was the third story? I know there's the counterfeiters and the mad scientist and his beast. So anyway, one thing I really like about these comics is the variety of threats that Captain America and Bucky take on. But basically, anything detracting from the U.S. war force and the U.S. war effort to join, be an allied nation and fight against, the Axis powers, is stuff that they fought against. Now there's, the Germans, it almost seemed like Chinese, but it was probably supposed to be Japanese, going after, basically trying to cause sabotage and things like that are some of the things that they focused on in the first couple issues. But in here we just get like a couple random stories. One of the stories is just a dream that Bucky's having, and Betty Ross is a princess, and her dad's the rightful king of this country, and Ivan the Terrible, I think is what they called him, is trying to take over. And it's funny because I was thinking, this doesn't make sense. They were just all the poor people, which I couldn't tell if they were actual poor people in the first story or if they were Nazi sympathizers disguising themselves as poor beggars to plunder wealth from, good, hardworking Americans. Anyway, I couldn't tell if they were actual poor people or not, but anyway, they were talking about, they were all anti-democracy, so maybe, they could have been communists or socialists, or I'm not sure what, maybe totalitarians. It's funny because they just kind of give you enough information to enjoy the story. If you think about it too hard, sit on it too hard, or dwell on it for too long, things kind of fall apart. But I enjoyed it, and I'm not going to scrutinize it that much because I don't think there's actually an issue. It's just there are some things that are left unsaid, and that's not actually a problem. Something even more refreshing to me than the variety of the enemies that they face is the characterization that Steve gets. In like the Marvel movies, he's accused of being perfect, and I've always taken issue with that. I kind of feel like, well, I haven't read Superman comics, but I don't enjoy the Superman character as much as other people do, and I have lobbed the complaint at Superman that he's boring, because there's, not enough, there's not enough, he's too perfect, and that's a criticism I've heard against Captain America, and I don't agree with that. I don't believe that, especially here. We get to see, kind of like what was done later with Spider-Man, that Captain America gets to have his problems. He always looks like a dupe in front of, or like a goof in front of Betty Ross, who he routinely saves as Captain America. And he and Bucky are constantly in trouble with Captain Duffy, and he doesn't get to be 100% right all the time. And as Captain America, he faces legitimate danger, and his life is actually at risk. And I think all of those things are really good. He's a very human character, but he's a very good character, and he's a man trying to do the right thing. And I think one of the most appealing things about that imperfection, or about the depth or the profundity of the struggles that he faces and that Bucky faces alongside him, is that those struggles make them really real. They make them, identifiable. They make them relatable. And I think, thinking back to the context of when this was, especially because I watched this PBS documentary I'll link to in the bottom, or in the notes, and it featured Captain America and a bunch of other superheroes, people talking about it, even had Kirby on there, which Peace ended up sharing a link with me that happened to, a video that happened to be in this documentary as well. Anyway, the fact that Cap and Bucky are not in the war, and by the way, if you've listened to all my Cap reviews, you would know this, but I'm not assuming that everybody has, so I'll just let you know. Captain America was running in the comic, or was on comic stands for like 9 months or so before the United States got, or was it 9 months or so? Early in 1941, Cap hit the stands. Late in 1941, December 7th, Pearl Harbor was bombed, and it wasn't for like another year or two that the United States actually had troops on the ground, and they were fighting in Morocco, and I don't know when Normandy was because I'm not a World War II expert, so I think that was the first, in Europe, activities for the United States. But anyway, young people who were reading these books, and even, older guys who, had yet to be drafted, or who couldn't have been drafted yet, maybe new people who had gone to volunteer and fight, or if they were immigrants, they might have had people who were, relatives who were still back in the old country who had been drafted to fight, or who, chose to pick up arms and fight for their lives because of being invaded and things like that. And it's kind of looking at it through this lens, because I started the comic, I started issue 4 earlier, and then I was able to check out that documentary, and then kind of keeping that in mind, I finished the issue. But keeping all that in mind, it was interesting to think about the fact that they, have their fragilities, their weaknesses, their struggles, and that would have been very real to somebody living at the time when war was going on, and where they had people who they knew who were going to war, or they were looking at themselves going to war one day, and it's interesting to think about how people might draw strength from those fictional characters going through similar struggles, that they have faced, that they anticipated facing, or that they knew others were facing, so they were, facing them along with them, facing them in spirit. And I think that's a really neat thing. I'm not in that situation at all right now, but I could still see that it would connect with somebody emotionally, and I wonder how much of that was an additional element that like cemented Captain America, in the psyche of the United States. That being said, as I read through, I thought, this is funny. The first issue, or first story told here, was pro-democracy, and now they're defending a monarch, and what exactly? But it turned out that it was a dream, so that kind of makes sense. But the point I was trying to make in that scattered smattering of words is that I very much enjoy the variety. I enjoy how exciting the stories get to be. The enemies being so freakish and so monstrous at times is really interesting, because you have, on the other hand, gangsters. I'm going to say gangsters with Tommy guns, even though I don't think they technically have Tommy guns in these stories. But anyway, you have stuff like that, and it's really fun that the two of them get to take on such varied threats. And I think when I think of Captain America, well, I guess I should put it this way. I think that when people think of Captain America, they think only about the war stuff. But I don't really have a good grasp yet of how much of his first stories are actually about that, because there's already a decent variety. And, how many times can you have him punching Hitler? How many times can you have him fighting Nazis? The Nazi sympathizers and the traitors to the U.S., that seems more exciting. And just from a perspective of keeping things cool, you want it to be as dynamic and entertaining and engaging as possible by having, different types of enemies for them to fight all the time. And as a final note, it's interesting to me to think that, while you may have been suffering through these things, you could look to the victories that Bucky and Cap have in the pages of these comics, because they get to be this terrific, powerful fighting team who stops injustice, who doesn't get shot, who doesn't get wounded, who doesn't die, who doesn't come home in a body bag. They get to live on and have these adventures, and you get to root for them, cheer for them, and feel for them. And it almost strikes me as a little bit of a power fantasy too. Like it was, kind of propaganda to encourage people to get into the war, perhaps. And you can look at all the history. If you want to have a discussion of the history of the U.S. involvement in World War II, I'd be happy to do that at some point. But right now, I'm just thinking about what I know, and the fact that this was, propaganda. And I'm not saying that is as an attack against the comics, but it might have encouraged. I could definitely see reading this and then wanting to go fight, like Cap, like Bucky, like real men I'd known who had gone before me. And I think encouraging heroism is a good thing. So I'll commend Cap for that. I'll tip my cap to Cap, or to Kirby and Simon for that. And gosh, I don't know what else to say. Really enjoyed these, and I think I'll go ahead and wrap up now. Thanks for sticking with me. Check out mjmunoz.com for more of my work. I'm an aspiring author who will gladly accept your financial support through coffee, or you can buy merch from my Redbubble store. Swinging Through Comics can be found on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and mjmunoz.com/STC. Relevant links are in the show notes. If you had a good time, like and share this. Subscribe and ring that bell to catch me next time I'm swinging through comics. And like I said, I will post a link for the documentary that I watched. It was done by PBS. It's on Amazon. If you have Amazon Prime, you can check it out. It's included with the price of it. And yeah, I'm going to keep learning about comics, and both from outside sources and then just from the material themselves, because I think it's a superior form of media to like a lot of other things. So yes, that's all I have to say. Take care.